Well, this is the famous, iconic bridge in the city of Newcastle, across the River Tyne. And I'm speaking here in Newcastle on the UK tour, then going on to South Wales, to Swansea, to Cardiff, then to Watford and Colchester and Margate and Crewe and Torquay, and finishing on the Isle of Wight on December the 4th. And you know, it's almost surreal for me these days, because I keep watching the news and seeing my books from 20, 25 years ago being read back to me. And if anyone doubts that there is an agenda for the world and that events that change human society are not random but long planned, they should read my books from the 1990s and then watch the bloody news. And what I've done this week is just got a series of headlines, and just by going through them, I'll connect the dots between them and show, because I was talking about this so long ago, that we're not dealing with a world of random events in terms of that which directs and changes human society. We're dealing with a long planned transformation of human society to allow the few not just to manipulate the many in the end, but to completely control what people think and feel. And I'm going to start with one. I mean, you know, I saw this headline this week and, you know, you shake your bloody head. Alarm over talks to implant UK employees with microchips. Now, back in the early 1990s, I was writing in books about the plan eventually to microchip the population and connect them to a computer system, what has now become the global internet system, and to AI, so that basically we would be like tagged animals. And when the process began of microchipping domestic animals, I pointed out that actually this is a stepping stone to microchipping people, because it gets familiarity with microchipping as part of society. And people thought it was very funny. A lot of what I said 25, 30 years ago was, or even more recently, has been considered to be crazy. But it just turns out to happen. The penny might drop with some people eventually, that actually may not be as crazy as they thought. And so when I was in Sweden, speaking a few weeks ago, they have about 3,000 people in Sweden microchipped so far. They put the chips in, and that helps them to open doors and, you know, also start their cars, whatever. I mean, oh, that's fantastic. Give your freedom away. Become a tagged animal. But hey, I can open the door without pushing it. Lazy sod. And so now it's coming into Britain, and it's supposed to be everywhere. And this story is about the Confederation of British Industry, the employers' organisation, which represents loads and loads of businesses, saying that they're concerned that this microchipping of employees has begun, and the Trade Union Congress, the TUC, of course the amalgamation umbrella organisation of trade unions, has come out and said the same. And, you know, those people might have said, I'm sure many of them did, back in the 90s, if they heard that I was saying there's a plan to microchip people, everybody, they said, oh, that's that Icke, he believes in reptiles, he's mad. And now they're coming out and complaining, hey, they're microchipping people. Well, I'll say to the CBI and to the TUC, especially the TUC, it's supposed to represent working people, get your bloody arses in gear and start doing some research and realise that if you are going to protect your workers, your members and employees from what is unfolding, then you need to get informed about what's happening and the fact that this has been planned a very, very long time. If it wasn't planned a long time, then how could I have known about it so long ago? And so this microchipping is part of a massive operation to connect the human mind and the human body to artificial intelligence and to this so-called smart grid, this electromagnetic electrical grid of information based on the internet, so that up to this point humanity has been controlled and manipulated by the control of information. The control of information has dictated people's perceptions, because the perceptions are formed by information received. This next stage that we're now fast going into, please wake the hell up, people who haven't looked at this, for your kids' sake and your grandkids' sake, if not for your own. This grid is meant to connect to the human mind. So instead of manipulating information to dictate perception, a perception that suits the agenda, you give people their perceptions direct through microchips and nano microchips and through artificial intelligence. In fact, the human mind becomes artificial intelligence. And this is not me pulling it out the ether. This is what the crazies in Silicon Valley, who ultimately answer to the Pentagon, are telling us is going to happen. And they're selling it because, oh, it's a good thing. We'll be superhuman. No, we won't. We'll be subhuman. And every week now, headline after headline, story after story, is showing how this is moving on. So here's another headline. Exposure to cell phone and wireless radiation can reduce impulse control and cause violence. Now, this is something else. This is a scientific study, but it was in my books a long, long time ago. And it works like this. Every thought, every emotion, every expression of consciousness operates on a frequency, has its own frequency. So hatred is a frequency, love is a frequency, depression is a frequency, joy is a frequency. Different frequencies, obviously. And so you are broadcasting that frequency, generating it in the different perceptual states that we go into. But this is the key. It comes the other way too, or can. If you can work out the frequencies on which these different emotions operate, and they did that a long time ago, as my books have shown over the years, then if you can pound out that frequency across an area or whatever, you can trigger people to manifest that emotion or that state of mind. And what this story is going on to say, quite rightly, again, this is old hat to people who've researched this, is that you can get people in a state of violence, in a state of agitation, in a state of anger, in a state of rioting, by just pounding out the frequency that triggers that reaction in the brain. The brain processes information. In effect, it processes frequencies. And so if you pound that frequency out, the brain will decode it into the perceptual state that that frequency represents. And there was the one guy who was a former DARPA employee, DARPA being the technological development arm of the Pentagon that in effect is driving all this, driving Silicon Valley. What do you think Bezos and these people and the so-called people that run Google and Facebook, they're actually the ones really in charge? Are you having a laugh? And what we're seeing is DARPA as the driving force behind this AI agenda. The same DARPA that claims that it created the internet, by the way, with military technology, which it did. And this DARPA employee, former one, came out and said that he'd established that there are frequencies coming off all these towers around us that are disrupting human minds because of the frequency they're operating on. And it just shows you how compartmentalization works, where people and organizations are compartmentalized from each other and from other people's information, to the point where they're contributing to an organization with their little contribution without any idea about what that organization's really about when you put all the contributions together. So he's saying that he was trying to alert DARPA to the fact that this was happening. Hey, look, this is disrupting human minds. What would DARPA say? And it's what it's meant to do. So human consciousness and human perceptions are being manipulated more and more and more as this grid, this frequency grid, pounding out from all these sources of towers and communication towers. It's becoming more and more prevalent and more powerful in its influence on people's perceptions. And here's another headline: the rise of fascism in a brave digital world. What is a more profound expression of fascism than being able to externally control what people think and the emotions that people have? I mean, it's the ultimate fascism, surely. And that's what we're dealing with. A gathering grid of endless sources of Wi-Fi radiation fields, i.e. information, and broadcasting towers that are creating this sub-reality, this bubble of information, which is influencing massively the way more and more people perceive the world. And you know, it's hardly speculation to wonder where you've got young people in schools and universities and colleges where they're in a situation where they're in there all the time, close together. What the heck is being pounded out in those places? Well, we know Wi-Fi is everywhere for a start, but do the people there know what's in that Wi-Fi, or the frequency that the frequencies that it's generating, and what effect that could be having on the human mind and human perceptions, and not only that, on the human brain? Because, you know, for a long time, till very recently, scientists thought that when the brain was formed, that was it. Didn't change. Now they know, as they find out so often with things that they believe to be true, absolutely not true. There's something called brain plasticity. And basically what that means is the brain changes and rewires itself and changes the way that it processes information based on the information it receives. And so we've had this extraordinary concentration in such a short time, this bombardment of the brain, of this digital electronic technology, and it is changing the way the brain works. And we've got children now all over who sit in Wi-Fi fields all day and then go home to Wi-Fi fields and increasingly walk through Wi-Fi fields on the way from school to home. It's in buses, it's in planes, it's every bloody where. Because it's meant to be. It's part of this grid. That's why they're firing this Wi-Fi from space, so that no one can escape it. And, you know, people need to just lift their eyes from the soccer and the game show and just have a look at what is happening around them. Because a prison, a technological prison, is being constructed from which they will not escape if we allow it to reach anything like close to its goal. Because how can you escape something when you can't even think that you want to escape it because something else is telling you what to think now? Here's another one. Energy companies are charging households without a smart meter up to £150 more every year. Smart meters are part of this grid. What they do is they put a Wi-Fi field in every home that takes them, in every business, every school, everywhere that takes a smart meter. They are pounding out an electromagnetic field of Wi-Fi information. And that's why they're there. They're not there to save you money. Just talk to people who've got smart meters and ask them if it saved them money. But how they get this stuff in, including microchips, by the way, is they say, when people complain, oh, it doesn't matter. No, it's only voluntary. It's voluntary. You don't have to have them. And then what they do, because the idea is that in the end they're compulsory, but in the stepping stones between that, they then start making it more and more difficult for you to function without actually doing what they want. More and more difficult to function now, isn't it, without a credit card? You can't buy things or go places without a credit card, increasingly. So, you don't have to have a credit card. You just can't do anything if you don't have one. And the idea is to do the same with microchips and this other technology. And so what they're doing with smart meters, because some people have realized that, you know, sitting in yet another electromagnetic field 24/7 is probably not a great idea for your health and many other reasons. So, but what they say is, oh, no, they're not compulsory. It's just that we're going to make life very, very difficult for you if you don't have them. And eventually we're going to make them compulsory. And so one of the things we're going to do is we're going to make sure that you're going to pay a lot more money if you don't have one than if you do have one. And it's just psychopathic, callous, cold manipulation. And because this agenda is being pushed from all directions. And the people that ring you, that rung me recently, they won't ring me again, say, oh, we're in the area, we're fitting smart meters. Yeah, okay. All the best. What they do is they make it more and more difficult for you to function without what they want. And the people that call you, they haven't got a clue about this agenda. But they're advancing it without knowing when they are going to be victims of it too. This is what compartmentalization does. And why people need to, you know, start looking beyond the mainstream media and see what's really going on, because they ain't going to tell you. And then there's this one. Britain funds research into drones that decide who they kill. Something else I've been talking about and writing about for a long time. I've been pointing out that the plan is to create a world army which would impose the will of a world government. And one of the things that I've pointed out is that NATO is designed to become the central point, along with the current US military, become the central foundation of this world army. It's why NATO, as I said years ago, will be seen operating outside the North Atlantic, where it was supposed to be created to protect. And where do we see NATO now? In the Middle East, all over the place. This is the world army unfolding. And I pointed out that another aspect of this world army was that the European Union, this is a long time ago now, the European Union would create a European army. And eventually all of them will be fused together into the world army. And what we've got now is Macron and Merkel saying, yeah, we want a European army. It's been in my books in the 1990s, this was the plan. But they presented it as if, oh, we just had a new idea. No, you haven't. It's part of a plan, and you know it. Macron and Merkel will well know it. But the point is, in relation to this technological takeover, because it is an invasion. We're being invaded by technology and invaded by AI, which controls the technology. The world army is not meant to be human. It's meant to be artificial intelligence. So this story, Britain funds research into drones that decide who they kill, is absolutely in line with what I've been talking about, where AI will decide who invades who gets killed and who doesn't. And already in places like Dubai, you've got AI robot, quote, police officers in the street. It's claimed that the US Army, the US military in general, will have more robots than humans by something like 2025, 2030. This is what's happening. Again and again, these drones and these other military weapon technologies are being built with AI deciding what they do, and others being transferred to AI. So, putting it all together, and I could talk for bloody hours about this subject alone. There's so much to say. If people can't be bothered to do anything except one thing, or to look at just one thing, then please just look at the consequences that are unfolding around us by the hour of having AI and technology take over from human decisions and human activity. And even in the most basic form, think of the implications for jobs currently being done that won't be done by humans, and increasingly aren't being done by humans. Do you know, Britain alone, imagine what the number is in the United States and other countries with bigger populations. In Britain, there are 3.6 million cashiers. The whole process, the whole role of cashiers is disappearing because AI is taking over. In supermarkets, you see fewer and fewer people on checkouts, more and more people, machines where you do it yourself. But the same's happening in banks. What are those 3.6 million cashiers alone going to do to pay the rent? What about all the others whose jobs are going to disappear and are disappearing? Anyone think the people that are bringing this in, the Amazons and the Facebooks and the Googles and all the others, anyone think they give a damn what happens to those people? Of course not. We're being invaded, ladies and gentlemen, and we need to focus our attention upon that before we're overrun by the tidal wave of change that will turn humans into nothing more than a computer terminal on an AI internet.